Yeah, thank you. Be selfish, right? That's the key.
Well, we'll get to that. Like, probably one of the only ways to really keep yourself healthy. Before we start, we always start with the question, how do you, Christopher, keep yourself well?
Oh, how do I keep myself well? I mean, there are some staples, okay, and one of the most important staples that I have is I go with the flow, right? And so I'm someone who's okay with the unknown. And so I keep myself in a position where I'm always forced to be okay with the unknown. And what I mean by that is I rarely book a flight before the morning before I leave.
Wow.
Get up in the morning, I have an idea, and then I book the flight and then I take off. And people are like, how do you do that? And I go, I'm always testing the universe that everything's meant to be the way that it's meant to be. And so that's one of my staples, always keeping myself in a position where I'm in the unknown. The other major thing that I do is I'm always removing daily accumulated stress from my all of my soft tissues, right? And I'm always opening up all the energetic channels, and there's 16 major ones in my body. And so I do that through a process I call Bestercise, which is the best form of exercise because it's the only form of exercise I've ever seen that incorporates concentric, isometric, and eccentric contractions, right? So strengthen, recruit, stretch. Strengthen, recruit, stretch again and again and again and again and again. Till all of the channels of energy in my body are fully open and all of my muscles and fascia are open as well. That's number two. Number three, I always make sure I'm receiving five at a minimum, but at least 8 to 10 sessions of healing sessions a week from other practitioners.
Oh, wow.
So regular acupuncture, esoteric acupuncture, alpha biotics, deep tissue massage. I'm always investing in having 10 hours. Ideally, that's what I prefer a week. Of people putting time and energy into me, right? So it forces me as a male to be in the receptive mode. And I know growing up as an alpha male that I really focused on me being the one who's delivering the goods. And you know what? That plan will take you so far. But if you're never developing the feminine aspect of yourself, which is your ability to receive, your ability to grow gets directly affected. And so I saw my ceiling. I reached my ceiling with as far as I could go, but knew that I still wanted to have more success. And when I say success, success for people, other people's achieving things, success for me is my ability to unconditionally love myself and unconditionally love others. That for me is the definition of success. So that's a staple. The other staple, and probably the main thing that makes sure that my mind is quiet, my body's energetic, um, my body's super comfortable and really strong, and my emotions are always grounded, is I never ever do stimulants and I never ever do downers. So no sugar, no caffeine, no nicotine, no pharmaceuticals, no recreationals, no hallucinogens, and no food colorings and or preservatives. So I don't put any of that in my body. And then the other thing that I do is I make sure I get in a deep breath work session. At some point during the month, I'm going to go see somebody and join a breath work class and really get down to some deep, deep breathing for a couple hours. And if I do that, then I'm hitting on all cylinders all the time anyway. But then I'm really in a really good place. Now, what I did this week is I was in Phoenix, Arizona to do some teaching and to get recertified through this process called alpha biotics. And when I was there, a really good buddy of mine, Stacy Wiggins, introduced me to this portable infrared sauna.
Mm.
And I was like, what? You mean I can take this thing with me anywhere? And I literally, it arrived in the mail 2 days ago. I was at it that night, yesterday morning, and this morning. I will be doing that every day of my life, the rest of my life. Yeah. So I am someone who my entire life revolves around my health, revolves around my wellness, and revolves around my ability to serve powerfully. If my energy is deficient, can I serve powerfully? No, I can serve well. I can't serve powerfully. If my emotions are ungrounded, can I serve powerfully? No, I can serve well because I have a lot of really good skill. If my mind is hyperactive and my thoughts are fragmented, can I serve powerfully? No, I can serve well, okay, because my analysis is really, really good. If my body's uncomfortable, can I serve powerfully? No. I can serve well because I know how to work around discomfort. And for me, the only thing I'm interested in is serving powerfully because life is short. Like it comes by, it's gone. Woo! And if I'm gonna have an opportunity to be on earth and it's a really short amount of time, I want to be maximizing the time that I have with people and the time that I have with myself. So those are the things that I do to guarantee that I'm going to be able to serve powerfully every single day.
Amazing. What an incredible foundation of pillars you've built. And the epitome of that, fill your own cup so then you can better fill others. I would love to know more about Bestercise. This is a new term for me. What is this?
Oh, Bestercise is the business. Like,
I'm
there
missing
is
out. I can't
I
believe
would put Bestercise up against any other form of exercise on the planet. It's literally at least 100 times more effective. Literally 100 times more effective. And the reason why it's so effective is this. If I go to the gym and I bang out some concentric contractions, great. Well, I've built some strength, right? But the problem is, in the process of building that strength, I also lost range of motion. Okay. I'm also now storing tension in my muscle and my fascia. So concentric contractions are great. But if you're only using concentric contractions, you can only maximize your energetic and physical potential only to a certain level. Now, let's say I'm doing isometric contractions, which now there's two forms, right? There's passive isometric, there's active isometric. If I go to a yoga class, I'm doing passive isometric contractions. Well, if I do that, what's happening? I'm overstretching my connective tissue. If I overstretch my connective tissue, I lower what's called tonicity, which is healthy tension in my body, and I open myself up to structural injuries. Now, if I'm doing isometric contractions, which the only people that are really getting down on active isometrics are Pilates people. Okay. So if I do an active isometric, what's the benefit of doing active isometric, right? You can be doing planks and those kinds of things. Those are active isometric contractions. The benefit of that is this, is you're forced to recruit more tissue into the movement every second that goes by in order for you to maintain that position. So let's say you say, oh, I'm going to do a plank for 5 minutes. Well, in the position that you're in and with the muscles that you're using at your 1 minute mark, you might get tired. And then the body needs more oxygen or it needs more tissue, means more muscle fibers need to get activated in order to be able to maintain that position and recruit more tissue. So you need that. And then you have eccentric contractions. Well, the only people that I've ever observed using eccentric contractions are Olympic powerlifters. The only people I've ever seen use them. The eccentric contraction is fundamentally the most important contraction because it allows you to remove not only daily tension, it allows you to reduce your lifetime accumulated tension. So imagine I get in a position, any position you can imagine. In that position, I use my own body weight to generate maximal concentric contraction, maximal isometric contraction, and maximal eccentric contraction relative to the position. So I'm activating strength, okay? I'm recruiting more fibers and more oxygen through the isometric, and now I'm stretching and removing all of the tension that I put in concentrically and isometrically, plus the tension I put in over my entire life. So I get to change bone rotational relationships, meaning whenever someone has a pain in their body, right? Let's say you woke up and you're like, oh, my neck's a little stiff, or oh, my shoulder's a little stiff today, or oh, my low back is a little bit tight. Well, the only reason why it's tight is because that bone is sitting in the wrong position. So in order to rotate bones back into their ideal position, you need an eccentric contraction to be able to do that. So not only did I shift my body, not only did I recruit and activate more fibers, not only did I remove the daily accumulated stress and the lifetime accumulated stress, I've also rotated my bones into the correct position, which means now that my posture is absolutely supreme. And when my posture's right, my mind is quiet. When my posture's right, structurally I'm strong. When my posture's right, my emotions are grounded. And my posture's right, my energy is abundant. And
This
the
is,
only form of exercise I've ever seen that is able to do that is exercise.
and is this a program you developed or a program you
Yeah, yeah,
created?
this is a program I've been developing for 23 years.
I mean, it's interesting because obviously, as a trainer, I'm constantly keeping those variables in mind, but generally dividing them throughout the week. So the efficiency of being able to bring that into one session sounds incredible. And
Oh, it's amazing.
I can imagine that you have not always answered this question about keeping yourself well in the same way as a previous Navy SEAL. How would you have answered this question before you made this transition in your life?
Oh, yeah, yeah, that's funny. So if I've said how I'm keeping myself well when I was in SEAL training and or the SEAL teams or after, I would have told you I get up in the morning, uh, I run between 30 and 60 minutes, right? I come back, and at some point in the day, I go to the gym. Every other day, I'm pushing a lot of iron. And then every other day, I'm doing calisthenics for, 35 to 60 minutes. And that's what I'm doing. I might swim on the weekends, uh, but run, swim, calisthenics, and weight training.
So big shift. Tell me a
Big shift.
little bit about your career as a Navy SEAL. How did that begin for you?
How did that begin for me? A buddy I went to boarding school with uh, had a biannual magazine in his mom's basement, and I picked it up, and there was on the covers is like 6 or 8 boat crews. A boat crew's made up of 7 guys, and they've got telephone poles on their shoulder, and they're running down the beach. They got white t-shirts on, their names are stenciled across their chest, right? They've got on these green, like khaki pants and black boots. And as soon as I saw that, I thought, oh, they're going to be able to challenge me. And so within 6 months, I was on a plane and I was off at boot camp. And then about 18 months later, I was at SEAL training.
And how long did that last for you?
That last SEAL training took me about 18 months.
And then your
Yes,
career
sir.
in the SEALs was how long?
My career in the SEALs was from what? 5 years. So total 7 years and 3 months in that community.
Wow. And what was your life like when you left the service? What was the catalyst to that change?
Well, it's interesting. The catalyst to that for me, I'm from the East Coast. I'm from Pennsylvania. And I was at SEAL Team 5, which is on the West Coast. And I wanted to go to SEAL Team 2. So I found a guy who was going to switch with me. Okay? He was from the West Coast. He wanted to come back home, and I wanted to go to East Coast. And they were willing to pay for all of his effects to come to the West Coast. SEAL Team 2 is going to pay for him to ship all of his stuff out. And SEAL Team 5 said to me, look, if you're going to SEAL Team 2 and you're going there, well, we're not going to pay for you to go there. And I got that news, I think it was like the beginning of December. And I thought, you know what? Fuck you. That was my thought process. So I knew I had 90 days of vacation on the books. So I took a couple weeks. And then while I was on vacation, I thought, you know what? I think I'm done here. And while I was on vacation, I went over to NAB and I checked out of the military. They gave me 60 plus 6, I think they gave me like 75 days of money for not going on vacation. And I took my check and I left.
Wow. With
Yep.
no next steps, just
No.
trusting.
Yep. No next steps. And then I
Wow.
thought to myself, when was my life the best? Like when was everything in order? And I thought when I was running track and field, things were really, really good. So I got out, I found a school, I found a coach, and I started training for what I thought was going to be the Olympic trials. And that's what I did for about 2.5, 3 years. And I really worked hard and I focused and I put all my love into what I was doing. The problem is this is when you approach track and field or any sport like let's say wrestling or football, you can't go at it the way that I did. You can't go hard every day, all day long. And I used SEAL team mindset to train for the Olympic trials. And it was the wrong mindset because I kept getting soft tissue injuries. I'd have a nice race and oh, I'd have another injury. And I'd have a good race, oh, and then I'd have another injury. And so it was very frustrating for me. It was a very frustrating process.
And so, where did your journey go after that?
After that, well, let's say I had tons of pain in my body and I was in a car accident. Car blindsided me. I was at a stoplight. Guy lost control of his car and T-boned me. My car flipped around. I hit a light pole and I was in a hospital. And then when I got out of the hospital, the pain that was in all the other parts of my body was in the center of my hip. And I could never get away from this like constant throbbing that was happening.
And when did you realize? It sounds like at some point you realized your mental and physical health were out of alignment, really focusing on the mental, especially with SEALs training and track, and not so much focusing on the mental side of things and this, beautiful balance that you've created for yourself now.
Well, for me, the body was the indicator because I started losing my vision. Well, first I started losing my hearing. And then I started losing my vision. And by 33, I needed a full blown hip replacement. And, the challenge is when you're suffering internally, my institutionalization with going to boarding school and in the military is like you push through things and you can't push through losing your vision. You can't push through losing hearing. But I just basically sort of like kept all that to myself. And then eventually I reached out to someone, got it. I was in the SEAL teams with, who I went through SEAL training with, um, who showed up at my house with a yoga mat and a juicer. And I got some key understandings of things that needed to change inside of me. One, I realized by the end of that parsley, carrot, uh, whatever what else was in there, ginger, radish. I forget the other things that were in the juice. It took me a long time to finish that juice. To me, it just was like the most disgusting thing in the world, right? And the same juice today tastes like candy to me. And I realized when I was watching him, that, oh, he's fit and healthy, I'm fit and toxic. That's probably the thing that I got most out of those few hours with him. And he was getting in all these yogic positions, and I couldn't get into one of them. So I was looking at him like, well, he must have been born this way. I thought I was flexible. Obviously, I was inflexible. So I was inflexible and toxic and full of pain. And yet on the outside, if you saw me, in a bathing suit at the beach, I look like Adonis. All right. A 1.8% body fat, you know, well proportioned muscle in my body, super, super, super small waist. And I was just like fit and strong. But again, I was full of pain, super, super stiff, and very, very toxic.
So is
And
this
so,
where you started making that shift? Because I know you've been interested in like a more traditional Chinese medicine approach. Was he kind of the seed planted for you to explore that?
yeah, he was the first step. And then he gave me some suggestions. He said, "Listen, I think he had pity on me." And he was looking at me like, "Wow, I don't think the stuff I'm teaching him, I don't think it's going to take him very far." And he had already done some research into Rolfing, so he gave me a clue. So I went about finding a Rolfing practitioner, and they got into all of my connective tissue, which was very painful, right? They got in there, and I learned how to breathe while suffering through excruciating discomfort being pulled out of all of my connective tissue, which was what they term as fascia. And that was rough. But I got a SEAL team mindset. So what else am I going to do? And I got a lot of good help. But for what I needed, it was very different. I needed something that had more force, right? And I needed a system that would allow me to work on myself. Because if you go see, let's say you lucky enough to find like a top-notch massage therapist or a top-notch chiropractor, well, you can't go see them every day because you don't have money, right? Like all these things, they cost a lot of resources, especially if you're dealing with someone who's really talented. Like there's a guy that he does this where he realigns the sutures in your skull. He's $800 an hour. Okay. So imagine you're like a broke student, okay, and you got to figure this out. So I basically worked, and then all my resources, I would hand them over to somebody else to give me some help. The help they offered me gave me some momentary relief, yet was it what I really needed? No. There wasn't enough force there because all the tension I put into my body, I put it in with force. So I needed to be able to at least match that level of force when I was pulling it out. So I met some other people along the way, and they taught me how to use an eccentric contraction in two different movements. And then I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to figure this out. And then I basically recruited my buddies, and we figured out how to start working on each other for hours at a time, 3 or 4 days a week. And we developed an entire new body of knowledge and understanding that could basically take anyone suffering from any level of structural discomfort and stiffness and restriction to having instantaneous permanent change. And so I put my noggin to work, and I basically took SEAL training and the kind of effort and commitment it takes to go through something like that. I put that into HEAL training. And I went about it the same fashion that I did SEAL training. I worked on myself 6 to 7 hours a day for 5 years.
Wow. And so now, years later, this is what you're doing for other people. When did you know that you had felt healed and felt prepared to become a teacher for others?
Let's see. I returned on a Monday night or Tuesday afternoon from Northern California from a guy that I was learning from, and by Wednesday, I changed my entire business. Yeah.
Wow. What were you doing at the time, kind of between then and
I ran a business called Fitness Fanatics in San Diego. So I was the original person. Like when you look at CrossFit, all those guys were coming down watching what I was doing with people at the beach, and then they just started repeating it and adding things to it, right? So I basically started, training people outdoors because I said, look, one, you want to be in the sun. Two, you want fresh air. And three, all you need is your body weight. So I combined all the things I knew from track and field, all the things I knew I studied kinesiology in school, and all the stuff I learned from SEAL training. And every day I would put, 30, 40 people through a process. And I had three different parks in San Diego that I went to. One was down by the beach, one was downtown, and the other one was, where was the other one? The other one was in northern part of San Diego. And I trained people and I put them back together.
been helping people for a long time, just now in
Yeah,
a different
yeah.
direction? What inspired that want to help people?
I think, well, the guy that I went to go see, I had removed so much tension in 4 days. There was no way that I could go back doing what I was doing because I had access to more intelligence. And when you become more intelligent, you do things in a more intelligent way. So grinding and grunting it out was no longer of an interest to me because I could see how much I had shifted psychologically and how differently I was processing feelings and emotions. And I could feel how different my energy was internally, but how people were responding to me. And so that was much more interesting to me than just being fit. Like any monkey can be fit. Like all you got to do is show up to the gym, even if you have a, half-ass trainer, right? You can still get fit. But now, can I actually reach my potential for who it is I want to become, right? And becoming has nothing to do with doing. Becoming is like, and can I be more open? Can I be more honest? Can I be more direct? Can I be more clear? Can I be more energetic? Can I be more grounded? Can I be more powerful? Can I be more organized? These are states of being. And so I watched the ways in which I was being shift so dramatically that became of greater interest to me because when you're someone who goes through a lot of childhood trauma, my mom killed herself when I was 7 years old, right down the street from me, in the middle of the night. Um, I had dealt with intense levels of physical abuse from a babysitter who put my hands on a gas stove to teach me not to play with matches, right? So when you have that kind of stuff, it impacts your emotional and psychological growth. And I was observing myself making leaps and bounds in the ways in which I was being with myself. I was no longer guilty. I no longer felt shame. Um, I was no longer harsh with myself. I was no longer cold with other people. I wasn't silently judging them under my breath or actively criticizing them any longer. Like all that stuff was vanishing within like a few weeks. And I was like, whoa, now I'm actually in neutrality. My mind is in neutrality. My emotions are in neutrality. For me, that says, hey, I got a real shot at experiencing deep levels of happiness consistently.
So this sounds very adjacent to you learning how to be receptive as well. This naturally seems to have opened up
For
that
sure. Yeah.
perception. I can imagine having, a history of abuse where you had to learn to mature and, protect yourself at a young age. I am devastated that you had to learn that. And then to the SEALs where you have to survive. I can't imagine how difficult, and for men, and women listening, but men especially, that kind of machismo approach to close yourself off to receiving. I can imagine that's very uncomfortable in the beginning to allow that transition to happen.
Yeah, I think for me, because it was less of like a mental state, right? And it was something that was occurring energetically. It was like I would go to bed and then I would wake up and I would simply be more open. Like there was no effort. So, what I mean when I say instantaneous permanent change, what I mean is I did this work on myself for 7 hours a day, opening up my body, opening up my energy field, grounding my emotions, quieting my mind. And then I would go to bed, monkey, and I'd wake up the next day a zebra. I was like, whoa, okay. And I wasn't ever interested in going back to being a monkey. Like that's how radical the changes were and how fast they were occurring because of the amount of work that I was putting in. So the most difficult part of that was feeling all the pain as it was coming out in my structural body.
And releasing years of trauma and
Yeah,
damage, work and
yeah,
emotions and
yeah,
everything. I think you are making a beautiful point where you were so focused on the process and not necessarily this end result, but the process
yeah.
is does the work. So what kind of people reach out for you for help now in your day to day?
Well, it's changed over the decades, right? So when I was dealing with structural stuff, then people who had structural stuff, those people would find me, right? So the way that the universe worked with me is this is suddenly there'd be 30 people show up that all have back pain or back stiffness or low back discomfort. And I'd have to figure out how to solve that. And as soon as I figured out how to solve that, then the next thing would show up. Oh, all these shoulder people would show up. Then all these neck people would show up. Then all these ankle people would show up. Then all these knee people would show up. And I just kept figuring out how to master, how to resolve that so I could help anyone create instantaneous permanent change. And then the next level of stuff people started showing up with was like psycho emotional. And so, a lot of people started showing up that were having problems with their relationships. And the funny thing is, a lot of women would show up that wanted to get out of a relationship that they were in. So once I helped them reduce their lifetime accumulated stress load, they would never have the ability to go back into that relationship because their energy was vibrating up here versus down here. So this person would come in again, energetically try to pull them back down here, and there would be no way. Because the only way you can pull someone that's up here down here is you have to be able to match them up here, right? And then you can sway them down this direction. So I help people with very complex things 3 or 4 or 5 years in. Then people were coming to me that were like really suffering alcohol, nicotine, heroin, like you name it. And then I had years with those kinds of people. And now the people who find me, let's say from 2010 to like maybe 2020, it was really people who wanted to be highly successful. So basketball players, baseball players, Olympic athletes, that whole crew, and then very successful designers. I work in Los Angeles, right? So you can imagine, producers, all those kinds of folks, and then it shifted into people who wanted to be like a good mom or they wanted to have a better relationship with their husband and yeah, so it's constantly shifted like every 3 or 4 years into a completely different niche. And so I've had an opportunity over the last 23 years really to build an enormous well of information, but also tools and systems to be able to help them out of the rut that they're in and get them over the bump in the road, whether they're an athlete, whether they're a single mom, whether they're a college student and they just went through their first level of hazing and it's not sitting well with them and they're thinking about committing suicide. And like, in the end, people, all they need is attention, love, and affection and some tools to help them, reduce their lifetime accumulated stress.
What a beautiful tool that you can pass on to people. And I know you talk a lot about stress resolution, which obviously is easier said than done. And I think in our society, a lot of people have just accepted living with this, astronomically high baseline, or don't even realize how high it is. It's just accumulating, like you've said. How do you support people through that?
I think the first thing I give them is education, right? I help them identify where they live on the stress spectrum, right? And, the end goal is to help them become stress resilient. But in order to do that, we need to understand what are the four major, um, let's say, categories for stress, right? So you've got stress ignorance, and most humans are stress ignorant, right? They know two things: there's negative stress, distress, and there's positive stress, eustress. And the majority of the world knows that. But beyond that, they don't know anything else. And so then I have to help them identify, are they in the category of using negative stress management tools or positive stress management tools? And so an example of a negative stress management tool could be exercise, right? And that would be counterintuitive. Well, how could exercise be a negative stress management tool? You do too much of it, right? So let's say you're a listener and you're a college athlete and you're constantly getting injured. Well, obviously, it's now your exercise and your commitment to your sport is now a negative stress management tool. Why do we know that? Because it's hurting you. And so the other thing to think about is positive stress management tool. What's a positive stress management tool? Exercise. So the reason why I brought that one up is so people can see, oh, anything that I'm using, if I do too much of it, it now becomes a negative because it puts my body in a state of distress. Let's say water. Water is a positive stress management tool. But if you drink too much water, you can actually get really sick, right? And let's say something like carrot juice, positive stress management tool. You drink too much of it, you're putting your pancreas in a state of distress. And so, really, it's about helping them identify what are the negative stress management tools that you use. Let's assess what those are, and then let's back away from those and trade them one for something that's positive. So, if you're someone who's exercising in the morning when you first get out of bed in the morning, and then during your lunch, you're exercising again. And when you come home at night, you're exercising again. I'm wondering, why aren't you filling your life up with other stuff, right? Like if you have a body and you know that you have a mind which needs meditating, and you know you have emotions that need breath, and you know you have a body that needs movement, and you know you have a spirit that needs prayer, why are you putting all of your eggs in the basket of only being physical? Right. And so when I'm working with people, we're looking at where they're at on the stress spectrum. So build out a more full life and really understand why they're attracted to those drugs. So let's say, for instance, you have somebody who is their negative stress management tool is cocaine, right? Well, oh, okay. Well, what's cocaine? Cocaine's a very hot substance, right? So if someone's using a hot substance in order to feel balanced, well, then we know there's something inside of them that's cold. Well, why don't we just find out where you're cold inside and then start to bring more heat into your body so then you don't have to use cocaine in order to feel like you're alive? Why don't we just move the cold, stagnant energy in your body so you can naturally feel more alive? And let's activate your heart. So why don't we go for maybe some cardio exercise, right? Maybe 10 minutes the first week, maybe 11 minutes the next week. Let's work you up to 15 minutes a day. And now you're feeling that impulse, right? You're feeling that drive. You feel more animated in your life. And that's only one example of a negative stress management tool. I mentioned earlier, you got nicotine, you've got caffeine, you've got alcohol, you've got the most detrimental, which is white refined sugar and brown refined sugars. Okay, and then you got food colorings, preservatives, pharmaceuticals, hallucinogens, and I said pharmaceuticals. Oh, and recreationals, right? Marijuana and the whole litany of other recreational drugs that people tap into. And so once you can be honest, and I can get them to be honest with what they're using, and I can show them the reason why they're using it, and then I can go over to the list of positive stress management tools, and I can show them, well, a direct one for one would be this. Let's say someone is they're using marijuana, right? They want to calm their mind down and get into like a more focused creative state. Well, why don't I just teach you how to do like a 10-minute meditation? And then you won't need the drug. You've already put your mind in a calm space. And so my goal really is to get them to shift from utilizing negative stress management tools into positive stress management tools. And if they can do that and they can get off all the daily acceptable drugs, what's going to happen? They're going to have abundant amounts of energy. Their mind is going to be more clear. Their emotions are going to be more grounded, and their body's going to be more comfortable.
I like that you emphasize you don't use the language stress free. That's not necessarily realistic, but stress resilient, teaching someone these tools
Yeah.
and not only talking about what's being taken away, just replacing,
Yeah.
countering this with something positive. And I think that likely causes a lot less resistance for people who are listening. What advice would you have for someone who's, living a stressful day life and maybe not necessarily heading towards burnout, but can feel that they are carrying too much stress?
I think the first one, the most important thing is two, you've got to be able to assess yourself and see that, oh, I do feel excessively stressed. And then you need to tell someone, whether you tell a coworker, whether you tell your boss, whether you tell your wife, whether you tell your husband, your boyfriend, maybe you tell a sibling, you tell your best friend, you got to let someone know. Because soon as you let someone know, you're inviting someone into your story. And now there's no need for you to suffer alone because you're in the receptive mode. And so what I'm saying is ultimately is you need to want to be receptive to being honest with yourself and then which is inner honesty and then you need to be outwardly honest with someone else. And now people, someone in your family, someone in your sphere of influence knows that you're overly stressed and hey, maybe they give you a call on Thursday and go, "Hey, I'm checking in, Mike. How are things going?" And you're like, "Well, I'm still more stressed." And then your friend goes, "You know what? You want to go for a walk down at the beach?" "Ah, I don't know. I got all these other things to do." "Look, man, we'll just be down there for like 15 minutes. I promise you, you'll feel a lot better." "Okay, okay, okay, okay." And they go down to the beach, they go for a short walk. He starts offloading some things that are bothering him in his relationship with his kid, or his relationship with his wife, or his relationship with work, or his relationship with money. And then before you know it, that 15 minutes has turned into 30 minutes. And Mike goes home and he feels a lot better just by simply getting that off of his chest with someone that he trusts, which means it's somebody that cares about him. And so I think those are the two easiest things because one, they don't require you to spend any money, right? All they require you is to spend a little bit of time, right? And to take an emotional risk to invite someone into the place where you're guarded, right? And that's a little more difficult for men to do. It's a lot easier for women to do because women naturally are receptive. Okay. They're if you look at polarity, a woman has negative polarity, which means she pulls in, right? A man has positive polarity, which means he pushes out. And so just simply inviting someone into your story is easy. The next step that you can do, which doesn't cost any money, is simply sit down, exhale for 5 minutes, breathe in for 4. Exhale for 5 seconds, breathe in for 4. Do 9 rounds of that. And I promise you, at the end of that, you're going to feel your stress load already drop a bit. Those things don't cost money. All they cost you is time.
Yeah, actionable tools that you can implement right now. As
Yes.
women, do you have advice for how we encourage the men in our life to feel that vulnerability, to be receptive if you're sensing that guard is up?
Yeah, I think as a man, the thing that we crave most is celebration. And it's so easy for a woman to go to her man and go, babe, I really appreciate you. You're so amazing. Thank you for doing all the things you did around the house this weekend. I really needed the help, and I know you had a really tough week. So I want to take some time to celebrate you. And as soon as a woman does that, a man's guard drops immediately.
Simple. All right.
Yeah.
You can do that.
Yeah.
Thank you for that advice. I want everyone obviously to go seek your resources and they're going to learn so much more, but I'm thrilled that people listening are going to take away actionable advice that they can implement today. And I would love to know what's next on the horizon for you, or are you planning for that? It's just going to show
Yeah.
itself as it flows.
Yeah. For me, I'm the type of person that when I was a kid, I wrote down the original bucket list, right? I was already bucket listing in like 1984. Okay. So when I first got into work, I knew I would be involved in it for 30 years, right? I, I had a 30-year plan, and I've got 7 more, right, to complete on. And really, it's getting the work out to the public so that they can experience these tools that are very accessible. And so that's my goal over the next 7 years. So I was just at the National Publicity Summit by Steve Harrison. For anyone who's listening, that's an author and wrote a book. I suggest you go there so you could and sit with the media and pitch them on your ideas and your book and the things you want to do in the world. So now I'm on a path of figuring out how to hire a PR firm and start doing 30 media placements a month, whether that's TV, magazine, radio, podcast, and continue to keep getting the word out there so that people can realize that stress, the only thing in between someone's success, meaning the thing that they really crave to experience, is unresolved stress. And once they reduce that lifetime accumulated stress and their daily stress, now their ability to have success emotionally is high, mentally is high, physically is high, spiritually is high. And I want more people to be able to have what I'm able to have. Clear mind, abundant amounts of energy, comfortable strong body, and a pervasive, um, powerful, impactful spirit.
What a beautiful thing. And I think you're inspiring people by your definition of success as well. I think that really causes pause of what are we defining as success. I love that. And I'm honored to be one of those 30 spots and to help support you in sharing this mission. And before you go, I'd love to ask you a few quick rapid fire questions. The first are
Okay.
those being, if you consider yourself to have a role model or someone you really look up to at this time in your life, who is that?
I think my role model has always been Jesus, and I'll say that more correctly, is Yeshua. You know, um, I think that level of commitment is very evident, and that internal strength and that absolute trust in the divine is the ultimate role model for me.
Beautiful. What's the best advice you've ever received?
Shut up and listen.
Best book or resource you'd recommend to people?
I would tell you my favorite book of all time is Mutant Message Down Under by Marlo Morgan.
Okay, I've never heard of this. I'm adding
No,
it.
you will. I'm going to give you my number after we get off the call, but after you read that book, you'll go, "Oh my God, this is the most amazing book."
Oh, I can't wait. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm so looking forward to that. Personal mantra or words you live by?
Whatever's in my body is in my life.
Hmm. And last but most importantly, for anyone who wants to learn more about you and follow what you've got going on, where can they find you?
Well, look, if you're someone who wants a reminder and likes to get like 30-second or 60-second snippets around stress and some actions that you can take, you would go to Instagram and you would punch in my whole name, Christopher Lee Maher, Maher. If you want to listen to a podcast, I have my own podcast. I release an episode once every 2 weeks. It's all about health, wellness, and stress from my perspective, the things that I figured out. And you can find that at truebodyintelligence.com. That's my website. And if you're really interested and you want to learn more, and you decide like, oh man, this guy, what he's saying sounds great, it resonates with me, I'd love to work with him, then you need to go to truebodyintelligence.com and order my book. And then you can set up a call and I will give you a 1 hour to 30-minute consultation for free. And I will help you figure something out that will add good value to your life. And if it isn't me, I'll lead you to somebody who'll be able to help you.
The incredible, incredible resource. And we will pin all of those on the show notes so everyone can find you. I can't thank you enough. I've learned so much. I'm excited to continue deep diving all of your content that you so generously are sharing every day, as well as to read the rest of your book and the new book. And I'm excited to follow what good you're doing in this world for these next 7 years.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank
Yeah.
you. It's my pleasure. Oh, Christopher, I can't thank you enough for your time. I